So we're doing remote recording. We're not in the same room, so some shenanigans going on here.
Yeah, Mark
But
is jet setting around the world,
yes, no,
around the
I'm
country.
in an exotic locale just outside of Winnipeg. At least it's not
It's a
snowing.
very, very desirable location for rental properties, or what?
Uh, you, we could do a whole episode on it. It's actually pretty good. A lot of demand.
Okay.
House prices are low.
Yeah.
So, yeah, Winnipeg area is not bad. And yeah, I've been driving. I can't stop it, right? When you're in real estate, like just driving around looking like, oh, okay, this is new. This wasn't here yet. That could be developed,
Yeah.
right? Look at all
Turns
the
out there's
pros, try and
houses
find out
everywhere.
demographics. Yeah, surprisingly enough, even in tiny little towns outside
Would
of
you
Winnipeg.
believe it? People live here too.
And lots of immigrants.
Yeah.
Like, do
Eh?
you people not know how cold it gets and how
Yeah.
hot it
Lots of
gets
new
and how many
immigrants.
mosquitoes there are? Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I guess it's better than poverty. But anyways,
Yeah.
we're off track already, like 5 seconds in. Um, so we're a fair ways into our recordings now, and um, our whole mo is real estate investing from a Christian perspective, and I think we need to we need to dive into that Christian perspective a little bit because for you and I, we have very similar backgrounds and similar beliefs, and that kind of guides how we operate. And it's an unspoken thing. So when we're talking about real estate, or if I'm talking about Airbnb, if you're talking about densification, there's a whole set of assumptions behind what we're talking about, what we're doing that are unspoken, but they're understood. But it may not be fully understood for all our listeners. So I think it's a good idea for us to dive into that.
Yeah, no, that's very true, and it is the mission kind of this podcast is to speak about all these different topics with that lens, right, with the Christian perspective. And
Yeah.
so we do kind of want to embark on a 3-part miniseries or 4, or depending on how long Mark talks, could be 6 or 7 episodes on Christian stewardship principles. And we've kind of decided to go on the first episode, this episode, to talk about the context. The context for the Christian investor. So, what is the world that we live in, that we're operating in? Just to kind of build a bit of a background for what forces are we up against as Christians when we're investing. What are some of the external forces that we might not be able to control or influence, and then what are the internal forces within us that we have to struggle against as well. So
Yeah. And it kind of struck me when we were talking about this earlier, some of the external forces and, the secularism, individualism. We've talked a lot about fiat money and its corruption, how
yeah,
that influences our thinking. And I'm just thinking back to the time of Jesus when we had the Roman Empire, which was slowly becoming more, maybe not slowly, but was becoming more and more decadent, more corrupt, right? They had a good money system. They had corrupted that. At that point, it was starting to be degraded.
yeah,
You know,
debased.
yeah, rampant individualism, secularism, I guess you could call it, or maybe other, other worship of other gods, institutions, but certainly the self, not outright, but that was behind it, right? So it is kind of an interesting parallel to our times. I often talk to people, and they're so pessimistic and despondent about our society and what's going on, and people will use this like, look, it says in the Bible this, and this, and that applies to our time, so we must be near the end of like the end times. It must
Yeah,
be. And,
yeah,
I'll gently point out, like, go back to, any
Rome.
point in history, but cycles of history. So, yeah, go back to Rome when the Bible, when the New Testament was written.
Yeah,
We have a very similar society in so many different ways, right? You want to, like, just socially, obviously, eventually Christianity would become adopted as the sort of state religion.
Yeah.
and
Well,
that in
they didn't
itself
have
corrupted.
they didn't have technology and cell phones and all of the different things we do, but in a sense that all of this technology that we have kind of amplifies the problems too, right? Like if the Romans had social media, what do you think their lives would have been like?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It would have been a very similar society. I mean, I think
See,
in
my
terms of well, just in terms of sexual mores, in terms of protecting the unborn, um, and yeah, just all rampant consumerism. On a different scale, but the divide between the rich and the poor, which we're seeing, that's growing again. So all these things very similar, and yeah, they didn't have TikTok.
although my education on ancient Rome is mainly from Asterix and Obelix comic books, so
That's I think it's pretty accurate. I think that's
yeah.
reasonable.
So you want to be the indomitable Gauls coming in, and so give us that magic potion, Mark.
Well, I mean, I guess that makes me Obelix.
Oh man, you fell
Oh
into
boy.
it when you were a kid, I think.
Yeah, that would exactly. I fell into a pot of boerenkool when I was a child. Only the Dutch people will understand that joke.
Uh, so
But yeah, let's get back on track.
yeah, so some of the ideologies that are alive today. So like as a Christian, we have to try and navigate this world, be in this world, and operate in this world and not of it. So um, not of it means that we don't internalize these evil or sinful ideologies that are out there, but rather
Hmm.
base our lives on the Word of God, right?
Yeah.
So I think one ideology that's out there, like you mentioned it earlier, was like consumerism or materialism. So how I don't know, how do you think that impacts who we are and our decisions, just in culture, I guess, in general, but then like as an investor when we're acting, like we have this in the back of our head whether we like it or not, because it's so pervasive in the culture.
Yeah, and it's interesting when you speak with Christians from, let's say, a third world nation. And I've heard this before, where they say we are praying for you, and we always, we're praying for them and for the gospel to be spread. But they're like right back at us. We're praying for you because of the trap of consumerism and how hard Satan works. He doesn't have to work through you can work through different means, right? And you can almost leave us
Yeah,
to our own devices and just kind of encourage us and bump us to be selfish and consumeristic and yeah, fall into that trap. So that's something we have to be
yeah.
very, very aware of for sure.
So just to kind of define it, like consumerism is really, I guess it comes out of this idea that like the physical world, the things that we have are like the only reality, and everything can kind of be explained through like physical phenomena. There's no like spiritual element, so that's like materialism, right? And then consumerism is like this attitude that your physical well-being or your worldly possessions are going to be uh, the most valuable thing to you in your life, right? Like
Yeah.
if you took away all your possessions, you would be devastated, and then it feeds into this desire of, hey, I have to do better than the next guy, right? Out competing the Joneses, and I think that tendency for somebody who's investing as well is to always see other people and their wealth and the things they've achieved and have this envy, right? Because hey, why can't I get there? Why can't I achieve that next goal or that thing? And that's something to
Yeah,
be aware of,
that's
right?
yeah. I mean that starts when we're young, right? That's something I'm working on with my kids. Because with four of them, inevitably one of them has something that the others want, or they get, even like a birthday, right? And it's
Yeah,
just trying to teach them, instead of being jealous, be happy that your
yeah,
sibling, someone you care about, got something good. And,
yeah,
such a basic lesson, but it's the same for us, right? And it's, I mean, it is a whole mindset. It's, I guess, probably started with, I don't know, postmodernism, even earlier. Once,
Modernism comes before postmodernism.
yes, yeah, it's not really
Are we
identified as
talking?
such, but
Are we talking
yeah, well,
pre-mod?
again, a little philosophical, right? But
Yeah,
once we made our own ourselves and ourselves the focus of our lives, right, as opposed to God,
yeah,
right? Nietzsche
yeah,
said God is dead and we've killed him, and that was part of that shift to where we no longer recognize that there is something else, a guiding force in our lives, and that would be God. And then with that goes, there's a whole bunch of implications with that, where then morality, if there's no God to determine morality, then who determines that? We do. But it's that shift from, away from an objective standard, which we've seen, even more now in the post-truth era, where everything is subjective and the only standard is my feelings. And we can say
yeah,
we reject that, but when you when we look at our lives, like, is that true or not? Right? Are we
yeah,
living? Do we everything we have is and we'll talk about borrowing later, but our lives are borrowed from God, essentially, right? All the things we have, certainly, but even just our whole lives. So if we understand that that's God's gift to us, and yeah, living on borrowed time, I guess you could say, but that determines a little bit more how you live, instead of just getting stuff for yourself and living for yourself. And I think most Christians would kind of reject that, like, no, no, we don't do that. Obviously, we know that, but it's insidious, right? It's in everything that we do. And you
yeah,
talk about the consumerism, right? We get stuff for us, and then once we don't need it, we throw it out and then get another
yeah,
something else for us. And you've
yeah.
talked about the short-term thinking that goes into it
Well,
as well.
just the consumerism topic. So, like in my background, so I have a design background. I went to Humber College in Toronto for product design, so industrial design. And this is an industry. Basically, you design products, right? So everything's design, and consumer products is a big industry. But lately, since we've shifted from kind of making one-offs to mass manufacturing, right? This is a little bit of a roundabout way of coming to a point, but now there's an industry out there to create products that incite like a desire to have it, not because you need it, but just because you want it, right? Like, and I guess that's kind of the tendency all throughout history is to play on people's desire for things they don't have. But if you, for example, if you own a blow dryer, right, and it works perfectly fine and it's great, but the company who sells blow dryers needs to come up with a new design next year to just to sell more blow dryers. That's what they do, right? So they hire a designer to go in and try and figure out what way they can manipulate the customer to think that their blow dryer is insufficient. They need to buy a new one, right? So our whole world is I kind of grew jaded by that industry and kind of lost interest in it after a period of time, because just seeing how if you want a career in this field, you got to go out there and basically uh, produce stuff that's maybe a marginal step better than the last one just to get a sale. Like, it just seems so materialistic, even though it's the exact same thing, right? Like, whatever happened to building stuff, the quality things that actually last and endure, and then actually investing in it. And that's what kind of led me into investing as a career. But that speaks to where, like, how pervasive this consumerism is, right? This whole industry just producing products that do this.
Yeah, and it's interesting that because that affects like durability and quality as well, right? We're willing to pay less for something.
Yeah,
Um, like I have an audiovisual background, and so I've installed many TVs in my life, and yeah, older TVs lasted longer, but we kind of there's a trade-off, I guess, as things get cheaper, right? Moore's law, technology increases, and then the cost of things get cheaper. But it's also just build quality and durability, because it's almost like as consumers, we understand that if I buy something, I know it's not going to last, but it doesn't really matter because, we think of a TV. In 5 years, I'm going to want a new TV anyways, because there's going to be new, better, whatever. And
Yeah.
we implicitly accept that for most consumer goods too, right? So, the repairman, like for most stuff, it's just not worth fixing, right? And
Yeah.
especially like even we see that in our rentals. If you have like an old washer and a dryer, it's probably worth fixing if it runs into a problem. But if you got a newer one, the cost to fix it versus the cost of getting a new one, like you might as well just get a new one, right? Now it's kind of sad
Yeah.
because we don't repair things anymore. We just throw
Yeah.
things out, and it's
Yeah. Yeah, our laundry
not a good
machines, the same
mindset.
thing. That's probably our number one complaint with our rental units is laundry machines, and they're all
Yeah.
brand new. And
Yep.
I get calls all the time, and the repair's like $1,000 to fix the transmission, or $1,100, and the thing's worth $1,200.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you're exactly right. Now I got a repaired laundry machine that's worth what the repair like.
Get a $2,300 washer. And
Yeah,
only
but that's the
cost
world
me
we live in,
$1,000.
right?
Yeah.
This is the context we're operating in. Like we have, and like to try to find a good quality laundry machine, right? Like you're paying, like a laundry machine is maybe a good example because like you could probably find one that's like commercial grade that'll last a long time.
You need
Like
to
maybe
go
in your,
industrial.
yeah, but like in your industry, a couch, for example, like an Airbnb unit, you want to have a nice couch. Like you
Yeah.
don't, it's not worth spending a lot of money on it because it's just going to get destroyed. But
It depends. Well, it kind of is because if you go too, and that's a lesson we've learned, right? If you go too cheap, you just buy the cheapest thing you can find at IKEA. It'll last a year, and then you're buying a new one. So I want
yeah,
it to last for, I don't know, 3 years probably. But that's even a good quality couch. After 3 years, you're replacing it. Yeah.
yeah. All right, so I don't know what else you want to talk about on consumerism, but we also want to talk about some other different forces as well. One of them being like the idea of the prosperity gospel.
Yeah. So there's my favorite topic. That's a good one. Um, no, so it is. That's another insidious thing, and it's really what we were talking about earlier with individualism, selfishness.
Well, okay, let's
Um,
just define prosperity gospel because I think our listeners is a wide range of different ideas about
yeah.
what the gospel is or what. So what would you say the prosperity gospel is?
Well, it's also called the health and wealth gospel, right? Basically, if you have enough faith, then God will bless you in your life with
Yeah,
health and wealth, and that's like every good lie has a grain of truth in it, right? So the Bible does speak about God blessing the righteous.
yeah,
But you can't, don't pick and choose verses, right? You have to read the whole Bible. And we'll probably talk about that later too, right? Just proof texting. Um, read the whole Bible and then interpret different verses in context or through other verses, other books, other chapters. So when God says He will bless the righteous, that doesn't just mean financially or with health, right? There is a good chance that He will, but that blessing, when we understand right, even just understanding righteousness, what is that? Well, our righteousness is not our own. It's Christ's righteousness that has been imputed to us, and that's the
imputed. Whoa, what is
has been put
that?
onto us. So especially as a couple of fellows with very, I guess we'd say Calvinist backgrounds or thinking, like we're very very clear on that, right? Everything, our righteousness again is not our own, but it's Christ. He's given that to us. There's nothing good in us. Anything
Yeah,
good in us comes from God, and it's not because of what we've done, and it's certainly not because of our faith, right? We know how faith
yeah,
works, but again, faith is a gift of the Holy Spirit. So you can't create a better life for yourself. And I mean, this is one of the claims of the prosperity gospel. If you just have more faith, well, then maybe you would get that better job and have more faith and you won't be sick.
Yeah.
And then, of course, people will twist that even further to saying, plant a seed of faith. And the way you do that is by financially supporting this preacher. And so you'll buy like an anointing oil or like they have all kinds of different crazy stuff where, you support them and then God will bless you through that, because it's how your faith is being worked out. And it's like, that's another way that they twist things, right? Giving is important. God wants us to give, charitable giving, support others.
Yeah.
But they're twisting that into like, well, you have to do this, and if you do that, God will bless you. Just like he told the Israelites, he will bless them, and he did for a time, and then he didn't. So people will look at that and say like, okay, so it's up to me to determine the course of my life, because if I'm very faithful and if I'm a good giver, then God will bless me and he will give me good health and he will give me wealth. And then they see these preachers. They see these preachers living in mansions, flying jets, having nice cars, all this stuff. And it's all utter nonsense, and it's a perversion of the gospel. And like, I don't say that lightly, because I know that there's a lot of people who follow some of these preachers and are all in on it, and they have the best intentions, but they're being led astray. And we can have doctrinal disputes, I suppose, as Christians, right? And you can have a conversation, about different things. But to me, there's no conversation here. This is just, it's outright charlatanism and a twist.
One of the things that I think with my turn. Okay, sweet. With regards to the prosperity gospel, so if you have enough faith, you will be richly blessed. And I think people would, in that context, they believe that God will bless them in this life, and that this life is kind of the one to live for, like physical well-being or material goods, like material riches, are God's will for me, and I'll be faithful, and then I will get these things. And this life is kind of what you're striving for too, right? I think it's important to recognize that the truth of the gospel is that there's an eternal perspective to have too, right? And that's more important and has a bigger impact on your life, whether you acknowledge that or not. That's a reality, right? Like, we have an eternal perspective, eternal future.
Yeah, so I had a discussion about this the other day. It was maybe a little one-sided, but even in the New Testament,
that's like our discussions,
as most of my conversations are. No, but even in the New Testament, we read about the rewards that we can reap for righteousness, right? And like that, it does not mean, like, it could mean that God will bless you in this life. That is possible, but that's up to Him, and it's not as a result of what you do. That's His gift. Right. But part of the rewards that we can reap by working tirelessly for His kingdom is by being in His kingdom on this earth. And I kind of use the example of people like with a presidential campaign, right? People will sacrifice a lot. They'll sacrifice everything just to work on a presidential campaign and to be sort of in the presence of that person, and to learn from them, and just to have that experience and to be part of that kingdom, right? Because the hope is also that after the campaign's done, if that person wins, you can be a part of the administration, so you can serve in that kingdom. And that in itself, especially if you're very ideologically motivated, that's a reward, right? You get to work in the administration of X, and you're getting paid, so that's fine. But you could get paid somewhere else too, but that's the reward. And so for Christians, that's our reward. We get to work in God's kingdom, and we get to see sometimes seed bearing fruit, not in terms of I got a Ferrari, but in terms of somebody who was lost coming to faith, right? And that's the best reward we could have. So you want to talk about rewards? There's your reward. And yeah, hopefully God just blesses you with a humble heart and not a private jet.
Yeah, you touched on it a few times. Just like the things that we have are, you said like on loan to us from God, or God gives them to us. Like that's so true. That God gives us, He gives us our time in our life. He gives us our health. He gives us our money. He gives us opportunities. Right. So another gift from God is, hey, I had an opportunity to, like, God opened a door for me. Right? You say that, like, you could pray for opportunities, and all of these things come to us, not through our own doing. So then when they come to us, I think this is the crux of stewardship, which we'll get into, is that uh, we are just managers, right? Like we get these things and we have to use them well. And
Hmm.
what criteria do we use to manage them well? Um, that's the other discussion, right? Like, what is if you've been, for example, if you've been gifted a lot of money, you can use that for yourself or you can use that for others, right? And
Yeah.
what position your heart is in will impact your decisions once you have all that money. Um,
Yeah. I let me just touch on the that prosperity gospel again a little bit for a minute, right? So you have people who wholeheartedly believe in this, and they support a given preacher or whatever, and then they get sick, or then they experience financial troubles. Well, what happens? Like something wasn't true. Some people, generally the response is, well, you didn't have enough faith, right? You
or you
didn't
didn't give
believe
enough
hard enough.
money.
You didn't give enough money, right? But at some
Yeah,
point, people are like, no, that's no, because I was all in. I gave lots of money. I did all the things I was supposed to do, and I still got cancer, or I still lost my house, right? And then their faith dies, and then it's gone, and that is like that. That's the worst thing that could happen to someone. Whereas if you have that, a solid faith, solid foundation for your faith, where you understand, like Job, that yeah, everything you have is given to you, and yeah, people will talk about Job sometimes too, where like, look at all the stuff, God blessed him because he did this or that. It's like, no, that's not true. God gave him a lot, and then it was taken away from Job, and then it was given back. But that was all God's sovereignty. That wasn't because of how good Job was or what he did, right? God
yeah,
still gave him faith. But the point is that this can be tragic for people because they lose their faith, and that's the worst thing that can happen to somebody. But all because somebody did not present the gospel to them in the right way. So I just wanted to
yeah.
throw that out there before we move on.
Well, I was going to say, how does that? So we're talking about the context for a Christian investor and how we're stewarding our wealth within that context. So if the
Yeah.
prosperity gospel is a reality in this world that we have to contend with, like what sort of reactions can we have to it? Other than saying, "Hey, that's an incorrect interpretation of the Bible," I don't agree with that. Um, yeah, how can we counter that attitude in the way that we conduct ourselves?
Well, I mean, I don't know that we're going to do that as,
There's a podcast
investing.
right there,
Yeah.
Mark.
I don't think as investing professionals we're going to do that, or we're going to prove to somebody that, like, no, look at this successful person. It wasn't because of their faith that they're successful. Um, that would be hard to do, but you got to go back to the Bible and you got to look at doctrine
Yeah,
and kind of teach that stuff. Um,
yeah. The
yeah,
other
and
thing too is
that
like
way.
the prosperity gospel could be alive and well in someone's heart when they decide to become an investor or take these decisions, and they're acting out of that framework, and they may be very disappointed, and like you said, they may end up losing their faith over it.
Yeah. Well, and you talked about opportunities, right? How because some people say like you shouldn't invest or you shouldn't do all this stuff because God will provide. And again, it is true. God will provide. But sometimes the way God provides is he provides opportunities. So that could be an opportunity in the way of intellect. Somebody could be very smart, and they could have opportunities to, whatever, get a good education and
Talk to Mark on a podcast.
I don't know if that's a blessing for anybody, but
well,
no, but
that question should Christians should Christians invest? I think we should talk about that more.
Yeah, absolutely. But so let me just say, I think God doesn't. When you say God will provide, yeah, God provides, but that doesn't mean we're waiting on manna and quails every day to feed us. Because, I don't know, I know some people like that, and life's not great for them, right?
I've always wondered what manna tastes like. But
yeah.
For those who don't know, manna and quail were provided to the Israelites in the desert.
yeah. Look it up. No, but yeah, that was where God made a point of saying, you're not gonna be self-reliant. You're gonna be totally reliant on me, and every day you're gonna get food, and that food will not last till tomorrow. So you can't even store things up for yourselves. Now, that's not, that was to make a point for the Israelites. Again, if we look at the rest of the Bible, it talks a lot about the value of hard work, right? Go to the ant, you sluggard. So if you're lazy, go look at something like an ant. Look at how hard they work. And it is true that God will provide for us.
Have you ever seen an ant? Have you ever seen an ant not working? I don't know.
Yeah, at the beach on his day off.
Yeah.
I guess they could be at the beach, but they're still working.
Yeah.
But the point, right? The Bible talks about the value of hard work, and not just for hard work's sake, but to advance the kingdom, but just almost as a virtue unto itself, as opposed to laziness, right? And so, if we're not going to be lazy and we're going to work hard, well, then that should be useful, right? It doesn't mean we all need to be missionaries and go somewhere and preach the gospel, right? We can do that in our daily lives as well. But the point is, you got to work hard. So that there's an opportunity. If God has given you health, because not everybody has that, if you can go and work hard and provide for your family and for others, there's an opportunity that he's given to you. And people don't realize that, right? You have that kind of pithy
you're saying they don't
example.
realize that they have to work hard?
Yeah, I mean, that's another cultural thing too, right? Where you have influencers and Instagrammers and all these people and all these tricks to get
Become
wealthy
rich
without
and don't
working
do
hard.
anything.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that's a tendency for investors too, to make it it's attractive to just say, "Hey, this investment will make you wealthy quickly. Get rich quick, right? Buy this house and sell it in a year for X number of profit." And that it's easy to fall into that. Hey, I want to get rich quick. I want this. The incentives. So we talked about this before, and this can go down a big rabbit hole about the incentives in our society today are such that hard work is not necessarily rewarded. Yeah, it is rewarded, but it's not valued the same way it used to be. And I think it stems a lot from what we talked about in previous episodes about money, the quality of our money.
So it is not valued, but I think paradoxically, because it's not valued as much, it's rewarded even more because there are so many people who are not working hard. So, and that's one thing that I've even said to young people entering the workforce. If you work hard, you'll beat 50% of the people out there in terms of competitiveness between employees, right? If you show up, as I forgot my own advice, right? But just show up consistently to work. You beat 50% of the people out there. If you work hard, you'll beat another probably 30 to 40% of the people out there. And if you've had employees, you would know how true that is. Just getting guys to show up to work hard, big struggle. And then of those, how many of them actually work hard? Not very many. So if you do those two things, you will outperform the vast majority of your peers. And then if you're a little bit smart, that'll like put you right up near the top. But you don't
Yeah.
have to be exceptionally smart to sort of outperform. But the point is working hard. Um, and I'm not talking like 80-hour weeks or anything ridiculous, but just show up and work hard and have a good
Yeah.
work ethic and like put in an honest 8 hours of work or whatever your day is, right? If you're there, work all day. And, and that has biblical a background, right? Because you're working not for your boss, but for
Yeah.
your ultimate boss, who is God, and you're serving Him through doing that by honoring your earthly boss. But anyways, this is my little rant on working hard. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah,
Now I
okay. So
feel
let
like
me
I
let
got
me
to
go
get to
off on that
work,
a little
Mark.
bit more. The right when you do that though, that has you create opportunities as well. And when I say you create them, like God provides them, but just practically speaking, and you talk about the get rich quick, and like you buy a house this year and then next year you sell it for X, right? So people see that and they want to get in there and however they want to do that. But usually the people who not even get rich quick, but who are able to take advantage of some of these opportunities, they've worked hard to put themselves into that position, right? They didn't
Yeah.
just go buy a house and then sell it, right? Some people sold a house during COVID or property and made a
Yeah.
ton of money, right? But that
Yeah.
wasn't a get rich quick thing. They had worked hard to get that place and put themselves in that position to
Yeah.
sort
What's
of
the
capitalize
proverb
on that.
about? What's the proverb? If you don't sow, you won't reap. Like
Yeah,
if you see these people all of a sudden being wealthy, or making like a good success for themselves, and you envy that, and but meanwhile, yeah, you're not putting anything out there. You're not doing anything. You're not taking action. You're not sowing. Then will you reap? Um,
yeah, and most business owners, if you talk to them, ones that are reasonably successful, will tell you that there's just years and years of struggle and hard work, and you're like, why am I doing this? But you persevere and you do it anyways, right? So,
yeah,
um, but yeah, opportunities. God provides us opportunities, and we need to take advantage of those. Like I think also the parable of the stewards, pretty good for the
yeah,
Two Stewards Show, even though there were three,
yeah,
right? The master provided opportunities for his stewards to do something, to show them what they could do. And two of them took advantage of that, and one was more successful than the other. But that's God
yeah,
blesses us in different ways, or blesses your labor. And the other one didn't take advantage at all, and he was chastised. So
yeah,
there's a good. I think that all that to say when we're talking about investing, um, like yeah, there's good biblical grounds for it, and if we have an opportunity, then we should make the most of that. Not necessarily just for ourselves to get rich, to be wealthy, whatever, but just this again, our life is not our own, so try to make the most of what God has given to us, not squander the gifts that He's given to
yeah,
us.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, and then the other side of it too is that there's this personal internal struggles that we have, right? Which is like greed. Um, so when we're an investor, we're acting and we're trying to, let's say we're analyzing an investment opportunity that comes up, and you have some money to invest and you want to make a decision. Um, you're dealing with these external things that like out there in the world, you have minimal control over, but you also have these internal things like in your own emotions, your own sinful tendencies, right? So you have greed. Maybe you want more, and you can't define why you actually want more. You just I need to have it, and I will do. And what that leads to, right, is like I will do this decision at the expense of other things that I should be doing or that are more important, or
Yeah,
I will act out of greed, and I will act in a way that transgresses this law, or harms my neighbor, or whatever other things that you are like obstacles in your way, and you're trying to achieve this goal. It's like I just need that, right? And then you open up your eyes and you're like, what did I just do? Like, and I think we all have these tendencies inside of ourselves. The other one is like selfishness, right? Like I want it, I want this stuff, but I want it for me. Like, and if you pursue your goals with that attitude, um, like a very self-centered attitude, that's also not what God wants for us, right?
Yeah, and that that in terms of giving too, like financial giving in the church or in general, to it could be charitable giving, but specifically we often talk about through the church or the deacons, right? Sometimes you'll have people who are very focused on, like, I have this goal I have to reach, and everything is focused on that. And once I hit that, then I can start maybe giving of some of the fruits of my labor. But for now, I'm not going to tithe, for example, right? Until I get to that point, or I just
Yeah,
can't afford it. There's a lot of different excuses, but that's not it's not God honoring either when you don't
yeah.
give anything. And maybe you've got especially when it's for a goal, right? If it's for certain circumstances, right? Some people can give
Well,
more than others,
because
and
that
that's
is
fine.
that shows a heart inclination or heart position, right? Like if your heart is inclined to selfishness, then you think, you know what, I'd love to give, but I'll give once I get this goal, right? Or like you said,
Once
you
I
have a
get
target
mine.
in mind. It's like once I make 50 grand, then I'll give to
Yeah.
whether it's the church or whatever other cause, um, and that can be financially. That can also be with your time, right? So, like for example,
Yeah.
I'd love to help people, but I'm busy with my life. So, maybe at some point, once I get to X success level, like a certain level, then I can give back to the community or my whatever those in need, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And the
And that
paradox
reflects
there
like,
is that I just
yeah,
like
once you
you
get all this
never,
wealth,
you never,
you're never gonna give it.
you're never going to give. You're never going to give your time
Yeah,
or of your whatever wealth you
yeah,
have, because you don't have those habits ingrained in you, right?
yeah,
Good habits should be good habits, like no matter what your situation is. And then you
yeah,
can always find another reason not to give, whether
yeah.
that's your money or your time, right?
Yeah, it's like, oh, I made 50 grand, but I needed a new car. So, yeah, maybe next year. Um,
Yeah. Yeah,
yeah,
or like, oh yeah, I'll get involved with something once I'm established in my career, and like, oh well, now I got married and I've got kids, and I'm far too busy to do anything, right? And then there's always a good reason. Well, it's not a good
yeah,
reason, but a bad reason.
yeah. And then the thing with investing is once you start building wealth and growing it, then it kind of amplifies all of these tendencies, right? Like if you have a tendency to be selfish and to not be generous, then when you get more money in the future and you have more wealth, that tendency could be more like, hey, I want more for myself again, so I'm going to invest again, and I'm going to try and make more, and I'm going to whatever. And you have all these self-centered plans too. That's the other thing. Like you have your own ideas for what you want to achieve without looking at the needs of others. That's so easy
Yeah.
to fall into.
Yeah, and I've heard that before, not from a Christian, but just a rule of thumb, like money is a magnifier. It just
Yeah,
magnifies your personality and whatever was there before. So yeah, if you're inclined to be selfish before,
yeah.
you will certainly be after, and if you're inclined to be generous before, you will certainly be after
Well,
as
and
well.
the other thing is pride too, right? So if you already have an ego about yourself and you think that, and that's a sinful tendency we have, right? Like I struggle with this too, right? It's like I have my own idea for who I am, and I portray a certain image, and that's me, and I'm whatever. And then if something hits your pride, like you want to restore that, right? We all have
Hmm.
our own self image, but if that becomes your sole goal and you're a proud person, like you said, money amplifies this, or it's a magnifying glass. Like if you have more wealth, it'll go right to your head, and it'll make your pride worse.
Exactly. Sorry, I'm giggling a little bit. We're talking about how you're always, you can always find an excuse to be too busy to do anything. I'm just looking at a
You're
toddler.
really busy. Yeah.
Well, it's like I can't do this podcast because I gotta You know,
Yeah, I can hear all the kids
but
running around in the background.
one of them has snuck
Uh,
downstairs. But
what are
but
we
yeah,
at?
that's always a good excuse too, right? Where people just couldn't possibly help out because they have kids. But then you look at the people who are really involved, and it tends to be the people who have taken on responsibility. I mean, that's a
Yeah.
whole other topic too, right?
Oh
If you
man.
take on responsibility, if it's like working out, right? The more you do, the
Yeah.
more you can do. If you never
Yeah.
take on any responsibility, and I think that's kind of germane to what we're talking about because just sort of that selfishness or
Except for I don't
self-centeredness.
know what germane means. That sounds like you're looping back to the beginning about the
He
Romans,
was
or
he was one of the Jackson Five, Jermaine Jackson.
yeah.
It
Yeah. I
just
also
means
also don't know.
it's a voyage of learning. I don't know.
Yes.
Apropos to,
Apropos. Oh yeah.
it's sorry, that's not a good one either, but it's relating to what we're talking about.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Relating. Yeah. So what were you talking about?
um, oh, sorry, a little static here. So yeah, no, just so responsibility, right?
Yeah.
And
Okay.
that
The
kind
more
of
you.
relates to giving as well. If you never take on any responsibility, then you'll never be able to handle any either because you haven't done it
Yeah.
before.
Okay.
So
I was getting my hair cut the other day, and like this guy comes in. He's 90 years old, and him and his wife are there. They've been married for 72 years, which is amazing. Um, and I just was chatting with him, and socialism is the way to go. We need more government programs and subsidies and welfare. We need, we need to be well taken care of. Basically, was the conversation, and I got to thinking, like, just based on this point, right? Like, you don't want to take responsibility for your own life. Like, you just want the government to look after you. And I think that's cyclical in society too, right? Like if you just hand over your responsibility for whatever it is, like healthcare is one example, and education, or like whatever, food quality, whatever, all these different things. So government could be responsible for that, or somebody else, or some other organization could be responsible, and I'm just going to live my life and be well taken care of. And that just is a downward spiral, right? Because now, like you said, you're not flexing that muscle, and when something comes up, then you're just overwhelmed because you're not prepared to deal with it. I think we talked about the welfare example
yeah,
too,
and then
where
you're
like,
also prepared.
go ahead.
Yeah. Oh, I think we have a delay here now, but sorry, go ahead.
So I was just to say the welfare example where, we have like basically people say, look, the government will take care of people who are on welfare, like who need assistance, and rather than me helping them,
Mm-hmm.
going out of my way, spending my time and money, and helping my neighbor out in my community, I just give the government the authority to do it, and they, maybe they hire professionals or they provide this service, and what that does is just makes more people incentivized to go on welfare, and us less incentivized to help people because we have a government organization to take care of it. That's a sad reality. It's like this little, again, downward spiral.
Yeah, and we take it for granted as well, right? That's just how society works, but that's how our society works. It's not how it always worked, and it's not really. I don't think it's a biblical example either, right? We don't have to take all of our cues from Old Testament society because there's also some merit to working with the system that we have, which is kind of I think more what Jesus kind of exemplified or said, right? Certainly, still take care of the widow and the orphan. There's
Yeah, like our goal is to understand
no
our current
prescription against
reality.
that, but yeah, and
We can
work within that
understand it.
as best we can while still conforming to biblical principles. So,
Yeah.
yeah, what does that mean? So, do we upset that whole system? I don't know. Maybe if you want to be politically active, but that's We're talking about real estate here, man.
I don't know. Was that last topic we just talked about germane, or I think next time we got to talk about
Yes.
the biblical stewardship side of it, right? The next step is
we can get more into actual investing.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, let's leave it there.
Yeah.
And
maybe we can wrap up. So I don't know, just in conclusion, maybe, I guess, right? We some of the things we talked about, so that people understand, this is sort of what's in the back of our minds when, because we'll do whole episodes where we're not referencing a specific biblical principle, but we sort of are, because that's in the back of our heads. So, right? I mean, there's a few things like everything we have is a gift from God. We need to use that responsibly. We should be working hard with that. And, you can define what working hard looks like, but you need to make the most of the opportunities that God gives you, and be a good steward, right? And that's, at the end of the day, we have, it's the Two Stewards Show, and that kind of is an example there. We understand it's not the two successful
fully
entrepreneur show, or the exactly, right? The stewards. So we're not the actual owners of the things that we have. We're just taking care of them. So that's my conclusion. Right?
That's a great way to leave it. No, thank you for listening. Next time we'll talk about biblical stewardship. Until then, steward your wealth wisely. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Two Stewards Show. If you like my voice better, click subscribe.
And if you like my voice better, click share.
If you like both, give us a 5-star rating.
To interact with the show, feel free to reach out at hello@twostewards.ca.
We will see you in the next episode. In the meantime, steward your wealth wisely.